You're listening to Reignite, a podcast where two friends take a 10-year-old video game way too seriously. I'm MJ.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon. And welcome to episode 2.
In this episode, we go over the Prologue, Finding the Prothean Beacon. Matt and I are going to address our different experiences, our different choices, and how they impact us as people. Matt, would you like to start off?
Sure. So I am playing Matt Shepard, which is my character I based on me. Early annoyances as we get into character creation with this episode. Mass Effect 1, and all of the Mass Effects for the most part have very limited, it's not hyper-limited character creation, because you can design the faces pretty intricately, but the hair and facial hair and even makeup are really limited. You can't have a big flowy beard. It pales in comparison to games like Skyrim or Fallout, where you can do a huge variety of different stuff with the different races. This is only human, and you can only pick short hair and pixie cut and mushroom cut and middle length hair and ponytails. That's about it.
You can kind of explain it away by saying you're in a military role.
Sure.
So there's only certain things that would be allowed. But also you would think this far into the future, there's so much variety in the universe that military might kind of relax their standards as long as there's someone in the military.
Well, and also all of the civilians share the same custom presets as... With the faces are fairly unique, but the hair and a lot of the other stuff is fairly in line with the character creation.
I have a point about that later.
But so I created my character Matt Shepard, who is a Vanguard, as we had figured in the last episode. I went with what I said I would go with last time, which was a military background and being a hero.
So Spacer and War Hero.
Spacer and War Hero, yes. Thank you for the exact words.
So for anyone who does not know, Spacer means that you were raised in the military. Your parents were also in the military. I think your father passed away when you were young. Your mother is still alive and a fairly high-ranking position. And because of them, you joined the military as well.
Yep. So you were raised on spaceship to spaceship. You were always in the with your parents in the military, so you didn't have a place really to call home.
Right.
And then War Hero is you saved your battalion from a horrible massacre, and you're praised for that, but also it gives you this gruff persona because you're grizzled from war.
So
kind
grizzled.
of nonsense.
You in a nutshell.
Well, I'm basing it on, and I had said this in the last episode, I kind of have in real life a superhero complex, and what I mean by that is I often go out of my way to try and help everybody, even to the detriment of myself. It's just kind of how my brain works. I'm better at managing that than I used to be, but because of that, I've often put myself in bad situations to help others, and so that's where this background comes from. And as far as the military family thing, that's the only storyline that sort of gives you a family life.
Yeah. The
other two, one, you're an orphan and you never knew your parents. And then I believe the other one, everyone gets killed. You have a family, but they're all destroyed. And so, I wanted something where a parent survived because I do have a fairly close relationship with my parents.
Right.
So that made sense for the character creation. And then I chose Vanguard because I like shotguns. There's no science behind that one.
That's very fair.
Tell me a little bit about your creation of MJ Shepard.
Okay, so MJ Shepard could not have blue hair because the Navy regulations are bullshit. So instead she has a shaved head because I figured if I had to enter the Navy and I was faced with all of these regulations and I was told you cannot have multicolored hair, I'd be like, well, fuck it all then. Just take it. What the hell am I going to do with it? If I can't make it pink or silver, then why?
Why bother?
Why bother? Why do I have it? So I chose shaved head. I know that aesthetics aren't super important, but for me, it builds my connection.
Yeah.
So I chose colonist, where your entire colony was captured by Batarian raiders, and everyone was killed except for you.
Yes.
You were picked up by the Alliance Navy, and because of the debt of gratitude, you joined the Navy when you turned 18. Mm-hmm. I chose colonist because when I was younger, I was almost murdered. It was a relative who was not in his right mind, and it's okay now. It's totally fine now. As an adult, I understand that I personally did nothing wrong. He personally did not set out to actively try to kill me. He was in a different place in his head, and it sucked. It hella sucked. I was 10 years old. Like, I didn't know what was going on, and I repressed it for a very long time. And because of that trauma, there are certain things that I personally cannot handle. Like, I can't have people come up behind me and, like, touch me without getting my attention. You cannot, like, startle me. You can't touch my neck in any way. Like, even passing, like, putting a scarf on me, you can't do those things because it puts me right back into that moment where I was being strangled and could not breathe. And because of that trauma, I connected with both Colonist and Soul Survivor. Soul Survivor just piled on the trauma. I was just like, bring it. Give it to me. It's fine. I'll take it. I'll take all the trauma. In Soul Survivor, your entire squad was killed by a Thresher Maw, and you were the only one that made it out alive. So I chose Soul Survivor because I feel like my trauma is such a huge part of me and has shaped who I am and how I interact with the world that it was important for my shepherd to also have that experience. For her reputation to be the person who survived a huge, messy, terrible thing and the only one who did so, it really spoke to my own personal history. Mm-hmm. And I also went with Sentinel instead of Vanguard, even though Vanguard's my favorite. I went with Sentinel because I figured if I personally, Mary Jane Bradley, went into the Alliance Navy, like at 18 years old, with my interest in magic and my interest in technology.
You would do both.
I would want to do both.
Yeah.
I'd be like, let's merge this. Like, I'd want to be throwing biotics. I'd want to be using an Omni tool. Like, these are the things that I'd want to be doing physically practical application. Now, playing wise, not my favorite thing to do, but it felt true to me, and that's why I chose it.
I mean, also on a more serious note, the reason Vanguard felt more true to me is because later on you get in the second game and a third game a charge that puts you in the heat of combat, and so
run at your problems.
When I'm in a conflict and someone is aggressive towards someone I care about, I always put myself in the way, and so Vanguard made sense. Yeah. Also, I prefer close quarters, which I have terrible aim in most shooting games.
Me too.
And so shotguns rarely require aim. Also, pistols, you get a boost to pistols, which are the easiest to handle gun, and I am not a guns person in life. I prefer a melee of some kind and to bludgeon someone with something. I am more proficient with that as I have long arms. So my logic was a shotgun and a pistol would be the weapons I would use because they would be easier to manage and or allow me to not have to do very much aiming as I would just splatter body parts at a close range.
Yeah. I have never shot a shotgun in real life, but I have fired a pistol. My ex took me to a shooting range and he taught me how to shoot with his gun.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed the act of like shooting at a target. Mm-hmm. It was very kind of calming and meditative because there wasn't anything going on around me. It was just me and the target and trying to hit the target. And that was a very calming thing for me. And it was just nice to know that I could do the thing.
I've handled a variety of weapons. I handled a shotgun once. It almost broke my shoulder from the kickback. But the weapon that I felt most comfortable holding was an AK-47 just because of the stock of it. But I've also fired pistols, which were comfortable. Again, I did it at a shooting range, and so it was also fairly meditative. The only weapon I refused to go anywhere near was one of the sniper rifles because it sounded like a cannon when it went off.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying. I don't think I would ever, like, just have a gun. I personally could not. Like, I would go to a range and do it recreationally for that day, and then that would be it.
Right.
That's it. I feel no reason for me to personally own a gun.
Now, also, MJ and I both live in New York. You know, we are both in areas and a position in life where we don't feel we need one. That could be different, be living elsewhere or being in a different position in life.
I feel like I need to correct you. Otherwise, my fiance will do it for me later.
Oh, right. You're now...
I live in New Jersey now.
That's true. You used to live in New York with the cool kids. I used to live
in New York.
All right. Well, let's jump into the first parts of the story, which is when you're on the Normandy. The game starts with you... having interaction with Nihilus, who is the Spectre.
I'd like to interrupt you.
Uh-huh.
The game actually starts where 3 men are discussing your future.
Oh, that's true, yes.
So Udina, Hackett, and Anderson
are
all, like, standing around talking about you.
While you stare stoically out a window.
Yes, and you have no idea what's going on. For male shep, fine. I guess that's fine. But for femme shep, I feel like that's some misogynistic bullshit.
It does seem that way, yes.
I have counted the number of women who get to speak.
There are not many.
There are not many at all.
Yeah, unless you're shepherd.
There are 5, 6 including femme shepherd.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. So you start off where these 3 men are talking about your future.
Yeah.
And talking about your history that you have now chosen. So we both had different intro scenes. Mm-hmm. But it all comes down to the same thing. They want to test your abilities.
Right.
For some reason. But yes, then you get to meet Joker and Caden and Nihilus.
Nihilus, who is a Turian Spectre, who is on the mission with you for some reason you don't know yet. Joker, who is the pilot of the Normandy, and then Caden Malenko, who is one of your possible love interests as FemShep, otherwise just a squad mate for male Shep, but he is a biotic. He was given biotics at a very young age and has had to live with them his whole life, I believe.
I feel like is he Adept or is he Sentinel? He's Sentinel.
Does he have both?
Yeah, he's a Sentinel.
Oh, okay.
He does both tech and biotics, and Liara. She's the Adept.
She's the full biotic. That's right.
Yeah.
And so the very first scene you have to interact with is Nihilus spouts some narrative dialogue, some plot, if you will, and then wanders off, and then immediately Joker goes, "I hate that guy."
Yeah.
Which is telling of. So Joker is voiced by, of course, the incredible Seth Green. And so Joker is a pilot with brittle bone syndrome, so he is one of the best pilots in the galaxy, but if he were to sneeze wrong, he would shatter all his bones. So, but he's snarky, he's got this kind of comedy armor that he wears. He doesn't really like people go close to him, especially in the first game.
He's so lovable.
You know, and then Raphael Sabarge is, of course, Caden Malenko, who immediately questions Joker's decision to say he ate that guy because Nihilus had complimented his flying,
but not complimented him enough.
Right, and so he said that he gives you a compliment, you hate that guy. Shows this bickering kind of dynamic between these two already that I don't feel really holds up in the game, but we'll get to that. But there's definitely a sense of it in those early scenes.
It's a little hard for it to hold up in the game because Caden's always in the mess hall.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, Joker never leaves the bridge.
Right.
And whereas in the second game, Joker has someone to, like, play off of.
Right.
He doesn't really have anyone to play off of in the first game.
Yeah.
So going to visit Joker is, like, a 2-sentence thing, and then you're gone.
Yeah.
But in the first section, we don't really get to see much of this because when you speak to everyone, they're like, the captain is waiting for you. Why are you trying to talk to me? Go away.
Right. And so there aren't any major decisions other than, you know,
just the way that you talk to people.
Right. And like when Captain Anderson hails you, you ask, you can ask, is he pissed or what does he want? Like, you know, you could either be aggressive or submissive as far as your response to that moment.
I wouldn't call it submissive. I would call it more...
Or placating, maybe?
Placating, respectful, almost.
Yeah.
Like, respectful might be too strong of a word.
Right.
I chose mostly Paragon dialogue. You could tell because Paragon's at the top and Renegade's at the bottom. And then there's the Walk the Line, which is the neutral.
Yeah.
But I found that the things that I chose to say were because I'm in a work environment.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily know everyone super well yet. I don't have that level of comfort where I can just bullshit with them. So I'm in a position of authority, and these are people that are kind of under my command. Mm-hmm. So I have to have this kind of air about me.
Yeah.
And also, if given a choice, I choose kindness.
Sure.
So if there is an option that makes me kind, then that is what I will try to do.
Yeah. I tend to do about the same, although I have to admit that for most of the Normandy stuff, I was kind of on autopilot because I just kind of fell into old habits of always picking Paragon, which is a bummer. But I will say that 90% of those I would have chosen anyway. The next really big discussion scene you get to have that's plot-driven is when you meet with Dr. Chakwas and Jenkins.
Kind of.
Like, you can have dialogue with Jenkins who...
You get more information out of them.
Right. Where, but you can kind of... Jenkins is very... he's a new recruit, and he's very eager to get into the battlefield. He wants to kick some butt, which we will find out very quickly doesn't end well for him. But you can either egg him on and be like, that's the spirit, or tell him to kind of like chill out because he's going to get himself hurt. And I took that option because I tend to think that bolstering... revelry about killing people is never a good idea.
Yeah,
just in life.
Like, it gives you the option to kind of egg on toxic masculinity or to call it out.
Yeah.
And, like, cool it down. And I think that's a really important choice.
Yeah.
Like, there are moments where we get these conversations, like, in our everyday lives. So do we choose to be like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Like, go ahead. Do that display of violence, or do we want to be like, actually, friend, maybe tone it down a notch.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And if we could stand up to each other more often, maybe there'd be less toxic masculinity, less violence in the world.
Sure, but I mean, chest pounding has a way of escalating when you confront toxic masculinity too, depending on the person.
Yeah, it depends.
But we do also get to have a brief chat with Dr. Chakwas, who's a character.
My beautiful space mom.
She is the ship's doctor. She is throughout the whole series.
She's my mom.
And she is always patching you up and taking good care of you. And she does... I'll have to double check the voice actress, but she's essentially Space Mom. She takes care of you, she nags you, she gives you a hard time.
Not counting Shepard, she's the first female speaking character.
Correct.
That you interact with. There are a couple of like female NPCs
like
walking
no
around.
Names.
Just no names, can't talk to them, don't care about them.
They just wander, they're on the ship.
They're there. And like also, let's bring up there's a very, like, there's a binary going on.
Yes.
And there's no room for, if you want to be more gender fluid with your character, there's no room for that.
Yeah.
Like, it's very strict. If you chose to play as FemShep, you have to have these characteristics that are, quote, inherently female.
Yep.
As far as the game is concerned. Which is frustrating.
Yep.
Because...
I agree.
If you identify as one way, but those are not the features that help you with that identity, then you just don't have access to those things.
Yeah, So the conversation of binary and non-binary and gender fluidity at the time when this game came up existed but was not at the forefront of conversation.
Right.
And so there is more gender fluidity, I feel like, in some RPGs now, but there's still boy or girl. Are you a boy or are you a girl? And so that's something that you kind of have to fall into. What I do like, though, at least about Mass Effect, is that your answers don't change based on whether you're a man or a woman.
Right.
You still get the dialogue is identical. You know, and it's delivered with, all of the macho kind of bravado stuff is delivered with the same bravado from both voice actors.
Yeah.
So there is some gender fluidity in that a little bit, at least, that you can play yourself as more of an aggressive, bolstered, macho person, whether you're male or female, as well as be more sensitive and kept to yourself or ride the line as a male and vice versa, however you want to mix it up.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but there are options.
Yeah.
But it does still essentially start with, are you a boy or are you a girl?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we address it, and just it's a problem in gaming, quite frankly.
Absolutely. There are very few non-binary options. The first time I actually saw it was this is a shout out to Cartridge Blowers, which is a group I'm in, and specifically Dan Colonna, who has a podcast called Dinosaur Machines, which is a gaming podcast, and they also do YouTube videos. And they recently played a game called, I believe it's My Monster High or Monster High School.
Oh,
Monster
I know
Prom.
about this.
Monster Prom.
Yeah.
And so they were all three hosts were playing it together, and they all chose different characters, and it's three guys. One chose a female character and even used his own name but made it female. There was a non-binary option, and there was a boy option. So like that was cool to see.
Yeah.
But gaming on the whole is missing that. Yes.
Yeah. I play a mobile game called Arcana, where you can choose your pronouns, and they will utilize your pronouns throughout the entire game. And I wish it's such a simple thing. It's not a complicated thing to do at all. And I wish more games would do it.
No, I agree as well. It's unfortunate that that's the case. But, that's just kind of where we are with that. So this is something that, as a non-binary person, it might turn you off to this game. Yeah. And that's something that we accept and understand.
So after you get to talk to Jennings and Space Mom, you may want to double back a little and talk to Presley.
Yeah, I didn't, but I talked to Presley first, maybe. But Presley is what is his title on the ship? Do you remember?
I think he's CO.
He's CO.
Is he CO or XO?
So this is the first time in the game, and it's very quick, but we deal with xenophobia in this game. There are several characters who have it, which actually I think is important to confront.
Yes.
But so he talks about Nihilus, the Turian, being on the ship and it making him uneasy.
Yeah.
Because he just doesn't like aliens.
Yeah, he's like, I don't like having outsiders around, especially a Turian. And my first thought is, okay, racist.
Yeah.
Fine.
But I think it's also important to address that, he's not a despicable person who hates everybody. Like, he's mentioning his discomfort. Unfortunately, Shepard's character doesn't really engage in it. You could say, knock it off. But that's kind of it. You don't get a lot of options with it. When later on in the game, Ashley Williams, who's a character that we will get to a bit later, she shows way more xenophobic stuff,
will address her.
And you can actually pick fights with her and engage her in it, which I think is important. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, I think over time Presley has different opinions, and you can engage him on his opinions. But this is the first instance where we're like, wow, okay, you're racist. Moving on. And it's disappointing that I can't actually say that to him and have that conversation. Like, why are you on this ship?
Right, yeah.
The ship is a team-building exercise between our race and the Turian race. Why are you here?
Right, no, yeah, for sure.
So after you have all the conversation you possibly can without being told, the captain's waiting to see you.
People like to nag you in the game. Like, they want to make sure you're going in the right direction.
You get to have some alone time with Nihilus. And dude comes off kind of creepy at first.
A little bit, yeah. Talking about how he's been watching you and has his eye on you. All of that stuff that's really unacceptable to a female character, but just as creepy to a man.
And this veiled threat against Eden Prime, which is humanity's current project and proof that they can have... they could exist in space. Mm-hmm. And it's just this moment where I'm like, what are you trying to say, my dude?
I do want to go back and give a shout out to Carolyn Seymour, who is the voice of Dr. Chakwas. I couldn't remember before. We're not going to be able to go over the entire voice cast, but she will come up time and time again, so I felt it was important to mention the actress by name.
Carolyn Seymour, will you be my mom?
Maybe. We should tweet at her and see. But yeah, no, he's it's veiled in mystery, and he's really aggressive, and then Captain Anderson eventually joins you, and you discuss together what's really going on, which is that you're going to recover this relic on Eden Prime, and it's a Prothean relic, which is the first time we hear of the race of the Protheans, which will come up a lot for the rest of the series. And then you get hailed by the forces on the ground on Eden Prime, which Joker patches through, and some shit's going down.
Yep, this is where we get to meet the second woman who speaks, Ashley. She says 2 words.
Ashley Williams. So Ashley Williams is really interesting. That the character skin color in the game is white, but she's portrayed by a black actress, and I always wondered about that.
Yeah, why just not have her be black?
Right. I always wondered. I mean, I'm glad that we have a diverse cast and that there are actually a lot of people of color in this cast, which is really awesome. But I always thought that was interesting and it was curious, and I've never gotten to ask the actress why. And I'd met her a few times, but I always forgot to ask, and I was always just curious.
Yeah. So
that actress, by the way, is Kimberly Brooks, who plays the voice of Ashley Williams.
Is this what we're gonna do the entire time?
I mean, for some of it, the ones I can remember. I mean, I haven't even mentioned that Keith David, one of my favorite actors, is Captain Anderson.
I hate you. He's Gus's dad in Psych.
Oh yeah, of course he is. Yeah.
Every time I watch Psych with Matt, you're Matt. Wow.
Yeah.
That's what happens when I spend time with you. Every time I watch Psych with John, and he comes on screen, I'm just like, Captain Anderson!
And does John just blink at you?
No, he knows.
Oh, okay.
John's played it.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
John knows. When he played Andromeda, every time we saw crossover, I was just like, we just gasped at each other repeatedly. So my favorite little moment when we see, for the first time, the focal point of the entire Mass Effect series, which is Sovereign, the ship, coming down onto Eden Prime.
Like a giant lobster.
Like a giant lobster. I'm going to have Matt take a picture of my impression of Sovereign, because I do this every time I talk about it.
If you point your hand downward with your fingers spread out, like as if you were making a hand creature,
he's a lobster.
That's pretty much what Sovereign looks like in the game.
He's a lobster. So with the space lobster coming down on Eden Prime, and all the soldiers are, like, harried and frenzied, and we get a video, and we see Ashley for the first time, and she, like, shoves someone down and says, "Get down." We cut to Nihilus after freezing on Sovereign, and there's this little mandible quiver.
Yeah.
And it sets the tone for the entire mission for me, because it's the silent, oh shit.
Yeah, like he didn't see that coming.
Yeah, which I appreciate a lot. And when Nihilus says, "This is going to be the first of many missions together," oh boy.
Foreshadowing.
Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
So from this point, they tell you essentially to gear up. And so Nihilus is going to run ahead, but Caden, Jenkins, who we were talking about earlier, and Shepard are going to roll in a pack together and bring up the rear essentially to kind of check in with the other Earthlings on Eden Prime, make sure that everyone's okay, and just, kind of sweep while Nihilus runs ahead, because he's faster by himself, which he mentions in a very badass kind of, I'm going to go alone. I'll be faster that way.
Don't
nonsense.
Split the party.
Never a good idea.
Just never split the party. This is how you die.
Yeah. And then you're off onto Eden Prime, and the combat of the game first really begins, where you're gun wielding with Caden and Jenkins.
Yeah, let's talk about this combat for a sec. Powers take so long to recharge.
Yeah.
So long. And
I mean, keep in mind that also you have no points in any of your powers yet, so that's part of it.
Yeah.
Recharge speed goes up as you add points.
I know, but I'm like, okay, I have to wait forever for this thing to recharge, because they make you test out all your powers when you first land.
Yep.
And, I don't want to charge into the next thing while this is still waiting to, recharge.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous for me.
But one thing that I'll say, so I did mention in the previous episode that I'll be playing on PC, and I might not be able to use a controller, and I was correct. For whatever reason, the Steam integration gives you a hard time trying to use a controller with the first Mass Effect, so I've just been using a keyboard and mouse. And it is actually making the shit show of a control scheme easier to play. Only because I am more precise with a mouse when aiming, but also, for those who don't know, most first-person shooters and third-person shooters make you use WASD to move and the mouse to look. Also, usually the number keys above are powers of some kind. This is in a lot of MMOs and a lot of shooting games. Well, because this version of Mass Effect was a re-release and an update from the original version, because this was, I believe, this came out around the same time as the Origin version, which was also on PC, they added some stuff. So you actually have a number bar where you can add powers and hit the numbers to use the powers. So the only way to use powers besides that is I think there are quick triggers for a couple, but for the most part, it's you have to pause the game, aim, and then press the button.
Yeah.
So
a power wheel.
And so the power wheel, while the power wheel becomes more efficient in the later games and you can actually quick add certain powers, this at least makes using powers playable much easier on the PC because you can just mash on those number keys whenever they're off cooldown, which was great for me because previously playing a Vanguard in the first game was pretty much shotguns all day because I couldn't be bothered to try and use the powers. So that was nice to learn at least. Also, before we get to I don't know if this happens before or after. Well, let's talk about the first major death in this game.
Yeah.
So
our first casualty.
So Jenkins, who you were talking to on the ship, who was gung-ho, ready to get into combat, and I kind of saw this coming even the first time I played because, of course, he was so gung-ho. He runs out ahead of the group, gets shot by floating turrets, and you take the turrets out, and then he's dead.
I'm fairly certain I was horrified the first time that happened. And it's still horrifying because knowing what we know, this is the first casualty of the whole series.
Yeah.
Jenkins, who is enthusiastic and bright and just willing to go for it.
I would question the bright part. The other stuff is true. I'm bright enough to get into the academy, at least, yes.
Necessarily bright as in smart, but, just bright as in sunshiny.
Yeah.
And, excited and enthusiastic and can't wait to do the thing. And even when you tell him, hey, it's not all gun battles and, fighting, it's helping people, he, takes it down a step and he's like, I'm just so excited to do something.
Right.
And he's the first one that gets cut down.
Yeah.
And
I mean, from a narrative perspective, though, it's important, too, because you want to remember that war, essentially the old saying that war is hell. This idea that even though you're really excited and you want to do good doesn't mean you'll get to.
Yeah.
So you get some interactions there talking to Caden about war, and you can either comfort Caden or just say
push ahead.
Yeah, just push ahead and say that, Jenkins got what he deserved because of his attitude. And, I, of course, consoled Caden a bit and kind of said, that this isn't over and we'll get revenge, essentially, kind of a thing. But then we get to do my favorite thing, which is you first encounter the floating gas bags on this planet. And so they're these non-combat enemies that won't engage with you, but if you shoot them, they pop. They're these floating gas bag creatures. And if you shoot one the first time, you scare the piss out of Caden Malenko.
Nothing says get over your grief here's something to startle the hell out of you.
And so, as you can see, while I claim that I'm really nice, and I am most of the time also any opportunity to be a pain in the ass.
A little bit of a dick.
Yeah, a little bit.
And
I play into that a bit in this game. So, but then after that, you continue to push forward, and this is when you first encounter Ashley Williams in person.
So, I want to point something out about Ashley Williams. When you meet her, she's wearing this white and pink armor.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I hate this.
Yeah.
Because...
the only reason it's pink is because she's a woman.
Right.
Probably.
But, on the other hand, I kind of love it because if we take this as, Ashley Williams did this intentionally and not some game developer somewhere was like, this is a woman who's in the military, she'd want to wear some pink. Let's throw that out.
Right.
Let's say Ashley Williams did this. Ashley Williams does not give a flying fuck. She wants to wear pink, she's gonna wear pink.
Yeah.
And I kind of admire that.
Right. And also, as you get... so something to note about the upgrade system in this game, it's a little overwhelming. Truth be told, I'm trying to engage with it as little as possible and get through it. But there's a lot of micromanagement. But the armor micromanagement, which is way more intense in this game, you can put any armor on any person.
Right.
So when you upgrade Ashley and take her armor off, if it's better for Caden, then Caden's wearing pink and white.
Exactly.
And, it's non-gendered in that respect, which I do like.
Anyone can wear this armor, and it does not really matter.
Yeah.
And that, I feel, is important.
Mm-hmm.
So that's... for me, what lends itself more to the Ashley wears this because she wants to wear it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, she's a woman, so she has to wear pink and white.
Right.
When you put any armor on her, it doesn't automatically become pink and white.
Right.
It's what the armor is.
Yeah.
So I think it's just cool.
Yeah.
Like, she's a female character in a male-dominated story.
Yeah.
And she wants to wear fucking pink, and she's gonna.
She is proven to be a combat veteran. You know, she's very skilled. You bring her into your party pretty quick so you can figure out what's going on. It's important to note that her character, at least in the beginning, seems fairly one-note, aggressive, one of the boys' female soldier character.
She's a good soldier.
Yeah. So, like, I don't think that she's written poorly, but at least in these early moments, it does seem very two-dimensional, but so does Kaden. So, at this point, the only character that seemed to have real development is, of course, Shepard and Captain Anderson. Everyone else are kind of archetypes in the early parts of this game, which is fine because you're kind of just trying to get through this first mission to learn what's going on. From here, you fight a ton of what you learn to be called the Geth, which are these cybernetic creatures that are organic robots. So they're living, breathing creatures, but they are essentially robots. Maybe not breathing, but they're living. They're sentient creatures.
They're sentient. They're not organic.
Yeah, that's true.
They're synthetic.
They're synthetic and they're sentient creatures.
Yes.
So they are not just following, but then there are also these talks that they follow an overmind.
Yeah.
And so like you don't get into the nitty-gritty about who they are. You just know you're fighting robots who are trying to kill you. It's also at this point that I believe, get to meet our first humans on the planet as well. You save some researchers and have a dialogue with them.
Yeah.
Which so this is interesting because...
I think I missed them, actually.
Really? I mean, you might have. You don't have to actually stop and see them. You have to unlock their door.
Is it the woman with the...
Research assistant.
Right, who's autistic?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I did catch them.
And so here's where is
the third woman to get to speak at this game.
Yes.
Continue.
My major complaint with this group is that, these two, is that they don't treat mental illness very well.
No, they don't.
So you meet these two, and one of them's raving, freaking out about what's going on, and rightfully so. And you find out that this researcher's assistant is autistic.
But they don't say autistic. Here's the thing. They set him up.
They set him up so you can call him a raving lunatic, essentially.
Right. And, you can treat him very poorly.
Yeah.
Or you can just be like, okay, this is fine, and leave, because, what else are you going to do?
Right.
What I don't like is they kind of describe this man in a way where you read this description and you're like, oh, that sounds like autism.
Right.
And then they present him in a very poor light.
Yeah, he seems manic and just
it's very
insane.
Poor representation.
Now, again, they're trying to create this narrative where you have to engage with difficult situations or to see how bad of a person you could actually be.
Right.
And so, interacting in that way makes sense. But essentially, the other scientist just says, "Oh, just take your meds, you'll be fine." And it's like, it's medicine isn't a magical cure. It doesn't make all things go away. And this guy just saw a giant spaceship destroy half their planet. So, it's reasonable.
Anyone is well within their rights to freak out.
Yes.
And I don't like, and he might not even be autistic.
Yeah.
We don't know that for sure because they don't ever actually, say it.
Yeah.
But they like to give you the impression that he might be.
Yeah.
And then you draw your conclusions, and that's what creates negative images in the media.
Yeah.
So, because they set things up a certain way.
Yeah.
I hate the media.
From that, we cut away to Nihilus catching up with Saren, who is a Spectre on the planet, who is at this moment, is one of Nihilus's colleagues, also a Turian. Something I notice now after playing multiple times is Saren already at this point has robotics integrated with his organics.
The whole time I'm thinking, how is no one suspicious of robot Saren?
Yeah.
Saren is half robot at this point. How is no one thinking the Geth are attacking a lot of colonies these days. Saren has a lot of synthetic components to his body these days. I wonder if there's a connection.
Yeah.
How can Saren, roll up and just, have metal cables coming out of his skull, and everybody's like, no, that's normal. That seems right. That's cool.
So rant aside about how obvious bad guy is obvious. Not Saren. Nihilus lets his guard down at this
Does
point.
every terrain look the same to you?
Yeah, maybe.
They shouldn't. They're all very unique and beautiful.
Anyway, you're just a Torian lover.
I do. I love them so much.
But
They're
Nihilus
so tall.
lets his guard down, lowers his weapon because this is his friend who he knows who he's a specter with. And then, of course, Saren uses this opportunity to slowly walk behind him, and when his partner is not paying attention, he lifts a gun to his head, and then it cuts away back to your party, and you hear a gunshot.
Which is one of my favorite, media techniques.
The cutback and to hear the gunshot in the distance is interesting because your characters at that moment don't know what's going on, but the player gets to be in on it and knows.
Right. So I love this. It's not really a trope. It's more of a technique, if anything, where something terrible is happening, but the story cuts away from the terrible thing and focuses on something that is less terrible.
Yeah.
In a book that I read, someone was being murdered, but the narrative cut away to focus on this vase and just talked about the vase while murder was happening off screen, so to speak. And I like when that happens.
Yeah.
iZombie does it a lot, where all the violence happens kind of off scene. And it makes it bearable for me.
Right.
I know that a terrible thing is happening, but it's actually something that happens when you're disassociating too.
Yeah.
So that is a familiar sensation for me. So that is probably why I'm like, oh yeah, I like that.
And so our characters at this point, though, have not learned what has happened. So you continue to progress through Eden Prime. You get to another building where you find some dock workers, essentially.
Right.
They're folks who are just helping move stuff, and they were supposed to, they're colony workers. They're not military of any kind.
But plot twist.
Yeah, so it turns out that if you pressure them, you can find out that they are actually smuggling weapons. It wasn't their idea. Of course, it's not their fault. It's someone else's fault. They blame a guy.
The twist is you have to have high enough Paragon or Renegade points in order to get this information. If you don't, then you find out nothing.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this game, and it's not the same in the later games, is that you can boost you have to make a certain amount of decisions to unlock it, but you can boost your charm or your intimidate
with skill points. Yeah.
With skill points, which allows you to use Renegade and Paragon options. In the later games, it's just the choices that power that. Your Paragon and Renegade increase based on the consistent choices you make. So we're going to lose a lot of access in the later games playing the characters more true to ourselves, I think, because we're not going to be picking every right or wrong option. We're going to pick the options that feel right in the moment. Because I have a feeling, knowing the both of us, as emotional as we are, in really tragic situations, we may be picking renegade choices, just because we're both reactionary people. But who knows?
It's possible. It depends.
We'll see. But so you find out that if you have these options, you find out that they're smuggling, which I did. I'm guessing you did as well. And so you pressure them, and they give you the name, and then when you go to the dock, you find that person.
Yep.
He gives you the scoop on Nihilus, tells you what happened with him, and then you can pressure him. If you do, he gives you a grenade mod and some extra grenades and some other stuff. You can
all the goodies.
And you can choose to shake him down one of two ways. You can either guilt him or threaten him.
I would like to point out, the fourth speaking woman in this game was one of the dock workers. Yeah. And she says 4 words, which is... She tells the main guy, we don't need that stuff. You should give it to them. They're soldiers.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yep.
Voice of reason.
I mean, it seems about right.
Yep. That's why I'm calling her.
And so when you pressure the dock worker, he gives you extra gear and apologizes profusely and even tells you where to go. It's at this point that it cuts back to Saren, showing him interact with the Prothean relic. And something happens, he gets levitated in the air, you see him struggle, and then it cuts away. But before that, he tells the Geth to place bombs that you will later have to defuse. And so at this point, then, you get on the tram, you fight some more Geth, and so we go through some more combat.
Well, you fight some more Geth before you get on the tram,
right.
And then you fight even more Geth.
Yes. And then when you get off the tram... You have to disarm all the bombs. They give you plenty of time. You would have to... And I'm playing it on a casual difficulty because we're focusing on the story for this playthrough. But even on the normal difficulty, and I think even...
5 minutes.
Yeah, they give you plenty of time.
I think I had 2 minutes left.
During these fights, you get a variety of Geth. You have the regular soldiers and the Juggernauts, who are harder to take down. They teach you how to use things that disable shields and all this other stuff. It's still essentially an extended tutorial at this point.
Yeah. It's not a tough fight.
After the fight's done and you've disarmed all the bombs, you get to where the Prothean artifact is.
Yes. Here is where an interesting thing happens.
Yes.
For male Shep, the person to approach the Prothean artifact while you're reporting, like, we found it, everything's cool, you're talking to Space Dad Captain Anderson, telling him what's up. For you, as male Shep, Ashley is
Approaches
the one
the beacon.
who, and then you have to, like, pull her away from it. For me, as FemShep, it's Caden.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from my perspective, I kind of like that it's Caden who, like, steps towards it and he has to be saved. I wish it was...
Always Caden. Yeah,
like,
because for me, it's damsel in distress.
Right.
And I don't like that.
Right. I wish it had been, like, this one person does it, because it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
For, like... for you to have these two different people do it.
The idea, I think, was, these are the characters who are going to be the mainstream romantic interest.
Setting up the romance.
And so,
you have saved them, and
right.
now they're in debt to you.
Right, whereas with Liara later in the game, her storyline's pretty straightforward, and you either interact with her or you don't in a romantic way. So that does happen. They wander towards it, kind of spellbound. You pull them away, but then you get pulled into whatever this thing does. For whatever reason, this time when you use it, it's scrambled for you. For whatever reason, the images flash and then it explodes and you go flying, knocked unconscious, fade to black. You hear voices and then fade to black. You have nightmares, which are quick visions, where even if you pause the game, are weird.
You can't really make sense.
You can't make sense of it. It's weird synthetics pulling from organics. You hear screams and screeches.
Weird mouth stuff.
Yeah, it's very hard to discern, but it's horrific.
Yeah.
Needless to say.
A lot of red.
Yes, a lot of reds and oranges, bright kind of fiery colors.
Yeah.
Then you wake up in the infirmary on the ship. It's, I believe, whoever you rescued in the room with you and Dr. Chalk was.
Actually, is it was Ashley with you?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Caden was with me.
Yeah, so it's whoever you rescued is in there with you. You ask what happened. You, you find out about the Prothean artifact exploding, and you can do a little bit of snarking here or just be polite either way.
Like, I had a little bit of a snark because Captain Anderson wanted us to tell the council. I'm like, tell them what?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I was like,
what am I going to tell them?
Right. So after you talk with the doctor and with your sort of preset romantic interest, you then talk to Captain Anderson.
Yeah.
And also, when you're talking to whoever you saved, you can either chew them out for putting themselves in danger, or just
you can just be like, it's fine.
It's fine. I did what I had to do, kind of a thing. Which I did the middling version of that because I was annoyed, and also I have a prejudice against Ashley having played the game before. I don't like her much. I don't like Caden much either, but I'm really not fond of Ashley. And we'll get into that more as we develop the character more in the story. But then, you meet with Captain Anderson. He asks you what you saw. You really can't explain it. And then, that moment happens where he's like, so we should tell the higher-ups. And you go, I chose to go, tell them what? We don't know anything.
Like, I had a bad dream?
Yeah. Yeah, you can snark about what am I going to tell them about my nightmares?
And also you get to say, like, I did nothing wrong. I did literally everything by the book.
Yeah.
Which is something that I would definitely say. It was
Absolutely.
like, I did everything I was supposed to. Like, no one can tell me that I did not follow instructions.
Yeah.
I had the book in front of me. I followed it step by step. I did what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that was good for me. What I don't like sometimes is you'll get a dialogue choice and you'll select it, but what Shepard actually says is something like slightly different in the same spirit of that thing you selected.
Yes. Often in the Mass Effect games, you don't say exactly what you've chosen. You say something in the spirit of what you've chosen.
And
but some are more egregious than others. Some are pretty much paraphrased, and some because
the tone is just so completely different.
Yeah, sometimes the tone is really different.
And like that's not what I intended to say. I did okay, fine.
It happens less as the game goes on. It happened a lot in the first game. Also, something we hadn't talked about is with most of these dialogue trees, besides Paragon, Middle Answer, Renegade Answer, which is on the right side of the dialogue tree. On the left side, there's usually a more information selection where you can expand the conversation, and sometimes you'll get more Paragon or Renegade for interacting in those parts of the conversation too. I skipped quite a few of them because I'm familiar with the game, and I also remember which ones expand the story and which ones are just kind of informational.
Yeah, I'm trying to like explore all options because I am very inquisitive.
Yeah.
If I have the option to ask this question, I'm going to ask it because I want to know. Right. Tell me the thing. Like, I am Hermione Granger.
I am Ron Weasley.
I know, you dork. So, after we wake up in the med bay and we have our interaction with Captain Anderson and we talk to Chakwas and we decide on a course of action, we're going to the Citadel, we get another cutscene.
Yes.
Where this blue woman that we have never seen before, the 5th speaking woman in this game, approaches Saren and explains what happened after he left, which was Shepard getting access to the beacon and the beacon getting destroyed. Saren throws a fucking fit.
He starts acting animalistic. He starts throwing things all over the place.
And then, like, here's what terrified me and, like, triggered me a little bit, where he grabs this woman by the face. Like, we find out that this woman's name is Matriarch Benezia.
For Star Trek nerds out there, it's played by Marina Sirtis, who, of course, is famous for Star Trek The Next Generation, playing Troy. And so it was really cool to hear that voice in a different way because she's playing a much darker character here.
Yeah.
But yeah, grabs her by the face and, like growls
really
in her face. Yeah.
And then, like, releases her very harshly. And I forget what he says to her, but he essentially says, like, we're going to have to fix it. And I want to know so much about Benezia. We don't learn enough about her, in my opinion.
No.
Like, where did she get that hat? I want to know. Do all matriarchs get that hat? Like, is matriarch just, like, a phase of her life? Is it a, like, religious position? I want to know so much about her. I want to know how she got involved with Saren. We
get a little bit of that.
Very little. Like, she explains her motivations at some point, but, like, I want that novella.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's also worth saying that Saren is also played by a famous voice actor, which is Fred Tatasciore, who's voiced tons and tons of characters, is playing Saren and playing it well because he's not doing one of his trademark voices. He's kind of really created this character, and you hear a lot of monologuing from Saren later in the game.
Yeah.
And so he does a really good job. But yeah, this whole scene is mostly also what Fred is known for, which is growling and making monster noises, which he does a ton of in that scene where he freaks out. And this is where you get a real good sense of who the obvious villains are of the game, so we think.
Right. And just, Saren. Saren, like, freaks me out. I don't like him.
I mean, you're not supposed to.
I know, but, like, I like when villains are kind of sympathetic. And, like, yes, they're clearly villains.
Right.
But you can kind of understand what brought them to this point.
Well,
like, they're still wrong.
Right.
But you can see how they have progressed.
Well, it's foreshadowing because he's more monstrous towards the end of the game, too.
Yeah.
Whereas the middle of the game, there's a lot of monologuing, a lot of intellectualism, and a lot of moments to relate to him.
Yeah.
But yes, in this early moment, he is very scary, and you know very little about him.
Yeah.
So this is where we decided to stop for the prologue. From here, we go to the Citadel, where we will explore all of the options on the Citadel, all the characters we can meet, all the story branches we can follow. We meet a good 75% of the major characters who will join your team on the Citadel.
It's actually a really good number.
Yeah. And
most statistics are pulled out of your ass.
That's true.
That one's probably, like, on point.
I would say it is, but you can fight me in the comments if you'd like.
50%.
50%? But you already have 2 teammates on the ship.
You already have 2 on the ship.
You get 2 more on the Citadel, and then you get 1 more after.
You get 3 on the Citadel.
Oh, yes. You're right. You do get 3. I miscounted. No, but then you still only get 1 after that.
Yeah, so you get 50% of your entire squad.
Oh, right, because you have 2 and you get 1.
You have 2.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, all right, fine.
Neither of us have degrees in math.
No, clearly. But yeah, so we'll explore that. You get to meet a lot more characters. You get to know Udina, who you will learn not to like. You get to meet the Council, who you will probably learn to not like. But we explore a lot more of the alien side of this in the next episode.
Which I'm really excited about. We get to learn what race Matriarch Benezia is, because we get to interact with various people of that race. We get to meet my two favorite characters. We get to butt into everyone's life on the Citadel.
Yeah, essentially the way that you, and we'll go over this more next week, but or 2 weeks from now, whenever this airs. Yeah, you butt into other people's business, and that's how you get party members, essentially. Which, truth be told, in older RPGs is essentially the same thing anyway. Yeah. Every lead character is a nosy Nancy who gets involved in other people's business.
So just to specify, the next section that Matt and I are going to play, we're going to scour all of the Citadel. We are going to do a big cutscene. And then at the end of that cutscene, you will be poised to leave the Citadel.
Yeah.
That is where we're going to stop.
So if you're playing along with us, that's your stopping point, and that's what we will discuss next. It introduces a lot of alien characters. There aren't very many human main characters in the next part, which is great. It shows how small humanity is compared to the rest of the galaxy, which makes sense. And yeah, I'm very excited to get to that. I like what we've learned from this preliminary discussion, but I feel like we're going to get into a lot more of the nitty-gritty from this point on, because there's a lot more narrative to consume going forward.
I would like to say rest in peace to Richard L. Jenkins, the first casualty of the Reaping. I would also like to remind you that if you would like to interact with us online, you can email us at reignitepod@gmail.com. We're on Facebook as Reignite and Twitter as ReignitePod. We're on some other social media, but those are the three main ways to get in touch with us. I would also like to thank David Boyle for our beautiful logo, which, guys, I got an email about our logo at 5 a.m. and could not resist the temptation to just email back in all caps, "This is so fucking cool." Our logo is so cool. You should all be jealous.
Yeah, I'm pretty good about explaining the kind of design I want, and he actually ended up creating a design better than what I had imagined. So thanks for that, David. We appreciate it.
David Boyle is the best.
Also, a shout out about our theme song. If you recognize it, it's because it's from Dan Boyle's track about Mass Effect. It's the first Mass Effect rap he ever did. I believe he has one about Andromeda now as well. And it's the intro to that track. I have not been able to reach out to Dan yet to get explicit permission to use it, but it is a tribute to him. You should definitely go check out his music. You can get all of his stuff on iTunes or find it on Spotify. I believe this song is also featured on his first gaming album, which he has of like 10 of now, called Generation Gaming, where he does a lot of rap songs about different games. If you're into gaming and you like hip-hop, definitely check out Dan Boyle, because his music is awesome.
All right, that wraps us up for this week. I'm MJ.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon. And this is your favorite podcast on the Citadel.